one who can blow up a tire. Checked and changed them on cars all my life. What's the difference with a plane? Set in a cage and let her go. Just balance them out. Nothing to it. But what?
Here are two men who think differently. His supervisor, a chief petty officer of the Aircraft Maintenance Division, and the squadron safety officer. They are here as soon as possible after the accident to make a report on what happened. This is difficult because the patient is delirious and may not be coherent for some time. There were no witnesses, and not much could be learned at the scene of the accident. Conclusions could be drawn, however, from previous accident reports. Without pushing the patient, the chief and the safety officer take the opportunity to discuss the situation. This maintenance man is basically okay. He is intelligent and well-meaning. But somewhere along the line, he is missing a proper, healthy respect for the requirements of his particular duty. Until they can get the crewman's own report, the CPO and the safety officer must assume that anything could have happened. Records show that it is an all too common assumption that inflating an airplane tire is similar to inflating an automobile tire. In spite of Navy instruction, the ground maintenance man's first mistake must have been to think that his present assignment in the Navy was the same as servicing his own car. It seemed so obvious, but it could have led to his own oblivion. He should have paid attention to the chief's instructions. The men in charge cannot avoid speculating what might have happened. The ground crewman might not have checked out the compressor before starting it. Did he bleed off moisture? Did he note whether valves were closed or open from previous use? Did he consult technical orders for approved procedures? Could he have taken seriously safe air pressure limits? There is little doubt that he used the hose on the high-pressure side for a low-pressure job. Could he have possibly used the pressure regulator? Maybe he had an outlaw gauge. It's inconceivable that he could have paid any attention to the pressure differential between the compressor and the tire. There is no excuse for being oblivious to the obvious. Directions for inflation of tires are stamped clearly on the aircraft and should become stamped on the mind of the ground maintenance man, or if not, read each time the tire is serviced. Did he remember that the pressure for the same tire should be different for land use and for carrier duty? He could not have remembered that while free air is the most common essential element to human life, compressed air can become the fuel of a lethal bomb. Officers closest to the line want to know how you get the men to realize the importance of their assignment to the Aircraft Maintenance Division to both pilot and craft, especially in the use of high-pressure gases, like air, for instance. It is important to understand the power of compressed air. Here's what's happening that you can't see, that can create a very unpleasant effect that you can see and feel. Air is made up of molecules normally exerting pressure on each other. This is happening around us all the time. When air is compressed, the molecules are pushed closer together and must be confined in a container. The pressure you put into any container, whether tire, accumulator, or anything else, cannot be greater than the receiver's ability to withstand it. You must think of air as a gas, rather than something you simply inhale and exhale. There's a simple, basic principle involved, but what a difference its application makes. If you exceed the specified required or designated pressure of the receptacle you are servicing, you are dealing with dynamite. Check the odds with your chief. Accumulators require just as expert servicing as tires. They are the reservoirs of potential energy that keep the parts of the plane that depend upon pressure functioning in any position. Nearly every major assembly of the aircraft depends upon compressed air. Wheel retraction, snubber hook, speed brakes, and other controls. Without the proper control of that little stream of air applied by the ground maintenance man in the first place, these planes would be lame ducks. Correct release of this force depends upon correct supply of it. Of course, the man wouldn't have been turned loose with a compressor unless he'd had some preliminary training, but he just didn't feel the seriousness of his job. You couldn't pinpoint the responsibility. Perhaps the crewman hadn't paid enough attention to his chief. Perhaps the chief hadn't paid enough attention to the questions of his trainee. Now, while there's still time for you, let's learn from the experience of others. There have been as many as 9 fatalities in 1 year resulting from use of the high-pressure side of the air compressor instead of the low side. Nose strut ruptured, allowing nose section to fall on personnel. Filling struck with air from high-pressure compressor without low-pressure regulator. Damaged nose wheel well. Maintenance man erroneously used wrong equipment. People hurt. Equipment damaged. You can always replace equipment, but people are not equipment. Airman struck on the head by bomb bay doors. The enemy could hardly do worse to any part of the plane or personnel. Why let it blow up in your face? Hazardous use of a high-pressure air compressor to refill low-capacity systems violates all recommendations for safety and can be as dangerous as a weapon. Learn the difference between a tool and a weapon. Pressure is a force for good or a force for evil. The results depend upon the way it is applied. Proper use also depends upon training. The handbook is an essential training aid, and it is only good sense to consult it frequently, no matter how familiar you may be with the job. The warnings and cautions appearing throughout the handbook should especially be heeded, and every man should be certified in the use of equipment connected with high-pressure gases in aviation. No one needs to get lost in details. They become almost automatic after a little practice. Just a couple of rules need to become an automatic part of your thinking. Never inflate tires with low-pressure air until low-pressure regulator has been properly adjusted to the correct pressure. Never use high-pressure air in place of low-pressure air. Never inflate tires with low-pressure air until low-pressure regulator has been properly adjusted to correct pressure. Never use high-pressure air in place of low-pressure air. Never inflate tires with low-pressure air until low-pressure regulator. Our crewman is back on the line. He has learned a lesson the hard way. Now, by diligent application of the rules that have finally become automatic, he is proving himself. His chief is pleased too. He can delegate action carrying out procedure and doctrine, but in the last analysis, he alone is responsible for what happens. And apparently anything can happen. Here's another use of compressed air that seems harmless enough. Just a quick brush for your clothes, or a little horseplay. But any opening in your skin can be like a valve, letting air in to blow you up like a tire. You can become a human accumulator that's never going anywhere anymore. Any high-pressure gas can be as lethal as a gun, the electric chair, or the gas chamber when fooled with. It must be used only for its intended purpose. Incidents will take place during the course of a normal operational day without the aid of horseplay. An aircraft dragging brakes, for instance. This is one way to build up abnormal pressure in a tire and should be handled like approaching a booby trap. Use a barrier around each wheel in case the tire should blow up. Such a tire must be handled like a bomb that might go off at any moment. The area of possible damage must be confined to the smallest possible space. Air should be removed while the tire is still on the aircraft. A flag replaces the valve to indicate that the tire is deflated and must be in place before the tire is put in the bead breaker. When the tire is inflated, before installation on the aircraft, it is inflated to the maximum required pressure in a booth and let set for the specified time. Then the pressure is reduced until ready for mounting on the plane. It will be necessary to top off after the tire is mounted on the plane so that the required operational pressure is exactly right. The important thing is to select the right compressor for the job. Bottles are best for some, but behind all high-pressure gases is the compressor. Calibration of the pressure regulator must be kept strictly up to date. Routine procedure requires a daily check of equipment at the start of the day's operations. Compressors are thoroughly inspected in accordance with handbook instructions for each compressor. Once the choice of compressor is made, our man makes a fast walk-around inspection, seeing that there is no loose gear on top of the compressor, then checks the operating panel. All condensation is removed. All dials are at starting and working position. A separate hose should be provided for both the high and the low pressure sides. The low side cannot be used for high pressure. If there is no hose on the low side, beware of using the high side for low pressure. This can be done with unfortunate results. This maintenance man isn't going to overlook anything from now on. There's no place for, "Look, Ma, no hands," in handling high-pressure gases in aviation. When topping off the tire, he regards the cage or barrier as life insurance. He checks the remote control pressure gauge, sometimes called the line gauge, that registers the pressure of the air that will go through the hose. And just in case he forgot something, he takes into account whether this aircraft is to be land-based or carrier-based. Is the hose 25 feet from the compressor to the tire? Is the line gauge 10 feet from the tire, neither directly in front of nor broadside to the wheel? This man has earned his certification. He keeps close tabs on the line gauge, inflating in 10-pound per square inch increments, bleeding off excess air as necessary until the proper pressure is reached. Pressing the handle registers pressure being applied. Letting up on it tells what the pressure in the tire is. The same care must be applied to any of the other numerous systems requiring pressure. The gas turbine compressor is used to start jet engines. It is in itself a jet-propelled craft. As with any hose conducting air pressure, if this is not connected properly, it will whip around with skull-breaking ferocity. The pilot lights off when the blades reach 15% of their momentum. The danger with the GTC is high volume of air rather than high pressure. The hazard just as great. starter, light the fire, and let's go. No matter what kinds of gases in aviation you're dealing with, you've got to understand the forces involved when the pressure's on.